Hello and welcome to this next video, number 19 in my World War II series and number 7 in my Golden Oldie series. Don't forget to check out my other series, Bush Mountain Water Strips in Microsoft Flight Simulator. This time we look at KBDR, Igor Sikorsky Memorial Airport, close to and northeast of New York. Here are some reasons why Sikorsky Memorial Airport is famous. Of course, it's named after Igor Sikorsky, the famous aeronautical engineer, famous initially for seaplanes, but then especially for civil and military helicopters. He was famous in Russia, Ukraine, before emigrating to the USA in 1919, age 30. Right next to the airport is a huge factory complex, last referred to before its closure as the Army Engine Plant. Here is a summary of its history. The first building in the complex was started by Sikorsky for seaplane production in 1929. This was his first permanent factory after having rented some space at College Point, New York, which we will see in the sim shortly. The factory complex grew enormously over the years after Sikorsky kicked it off. Here's an aerial view of the airport with its two paved runways. It started off as a racetrack and then used also by aircraft from 1911. You can see the huge factory complex at the top with the blue roofs. The initial building by Sikorsky in 1929 shown in yellow. Next to that is the causeway he built for his seaplanes. The famous at the time Glenn Curtis built a hangar there in 1928, which is still there and is heritage listed. The airport used to have regular commercial flights, but is now GA, General Aviation, only. Here's a bit of memorabilia from when the airport opened with the USA's first air show. There in the left-hand side picture is Sikorsky's first factory and causeway built for seaplanes in 1929. The right-hand picture is Sikorsky's and the USA's first practical helicopter flight in 1939. Big step up for Sikorsky to now being owned by Lockheed Martin, Sikorsky production facilities all along the east coast of the USA, major supplier of civil and military helicopters, supplier of the presidential helicopter, etc. But before helicopters, it was all about seaplanes, big-time seaplanes. Here's an indication of Sikorsky's fame, meeting with Orville Wright of Wright Brothers fame at the airport in 1942 and on the cover of Times magazine in 1953. Sikorsky was married with 5 children and died in 1972, aged 83. Well worth a Google search. The other main claim to fame for Sikorsky Airport is the famous World War II Corsair fighter bomber aircraft, one of the main aircraft in the war in the Pacific. It was designed by Chance Vought and manufactured and tested at what was then called Bridgeport Army Airfield and the adjacent factory. Around 8,000 Vought Corsairs were produced there by Vought, I think in conjunction with Sikorsky. And here is the mighty Corsair with wings down and also folded for aircraft carrier operations. Here's our flight plan for this trip. The left-hand picture is the overall flight plan, starting at Sikorsky Airport top right, overflying some other current Sikorsky factories, then down to New York bottom left, starting with where Sikorsky first rented factory space at College Point, followed by a little bit of sightseeing in New York, and ending in the now largely abandoned Floyd Bennett Airport. The right-hand side picture shows a close-up of the New York part of the flight. Well, here we are at Sikorsky Airport, quite appropriately in the mighty Corsair, taking off to the northeast on runway 06. Always a bit tricky taking off and landing in these World War II aircraft. A nice view of the airport to the rear with the large factory complex on the right hand side of the video. Now turning to the north, following the Housatonic River upstream to the first of the current Sikorsky plants. And there it is with its many helipads. Then turning to the west to the next smaller Sikorsky plant. And there it is coming up under the nose of the aircraft, not as large as the last one. Then turning south to the last of the Sikorsky plants in the Bridgeport, Stratford area. That's it coming up just across the far side of the channel in front of the aircraft, under the nose now. Now off to the southwest to New York for a bit of sightseeing. Approaching New York over Long Island Sound, Long Island to the left. Beautiful Orchard Beach in Pelham Bay behind the aircraft. LaGuardia Airport in front of the aircraft to the right, disappearing behind the map. And just in front of that, little island in the right hand corner of the bay, the right angle corner of the bay, coming up under the aircraft nose now, the first Sikorsky temporary factory, rented from another factory in College Point. Turning west over LaGuardia for some New York sightseeing, just for a bit of fun while we're here. East River and Roosevelt Island to the left, magnificent Central Park coming up ahead. The famous Met in the trees under the left-hand side of the aircraft, flying parallel to posh Fifth Avenue on the left between the buildings and the trees. Just look at those new skinny apartment towers straight ahead. My wife and I stayed in a hotel between those towers close to Central Park in February last year, just before COVID struck. Great location, and we luckily dodged a bullet. Over to the Hudson River. The Intrepid Aircraft Carrier Sea Air and Space Museum on the pier, off the aircraft left wingtip now. And just down there in the water, in the middle of the Hudson, is where Sully crash landed. Sully of Miracle on the Hudson fame, of course. Hit the water just about here, and the airliner skidded to about here after total engine failure, taking off from LaGuardia. Stopped right about here, nicely next to Port Authority and other boats on the other side of the river, on the left-hand side of the river. Next, the new World Trade Center building and the 9/11 Memorial which is on the ground just to the left of the aircraft, coming up now. The two squares there are where the original building stood. Very moving location. Brooklyn Bridge ahead on the East River to the right. Empire State Building straight ahead. Followed by the United Nations New York headquarters building on the edge of the East River, just coming up under the nose of the aircraft now. Roosevelt Island and Queensborough Bridge ahead. Down the East River, Williamsburg Bridge going under the aircraft now. Followed by Manhattan Bridge, and then of course famous Brooklyn Bridge. Staten Island and Manhattan ferry terminals on the right. Historic Alice Immigration Island on the right wingtip, and Lady Liberty herself, Statue of Liberty, directly ahead. Lovely view of Manhattan, New York behind. And now turning southeast towards our arrival point at Floyd Bennett Field, with the final view of New York to the left. And there's Floyd Bennett Field coming up directly ahead. Suffice to say that is now largely abandoned. Police helicopters and radio control planes still use part of it, and it's also part recreational park along with some other miscellaneous uses. But it has a great history, like Sikorsky Airfield, since its creation in 1930, and has many heritage listed features, so it may well be the subject of a future video in its own right, I think. Now turning final, runway 24. Again, as I said before, tricky to land some of these World War II aircraft. Sterile cockpit with silence whilst we try to do this. Coming in a bit fast, so a nice long flare. Few little bounces, but overall not too bad. Well, there you go. Hope you enjoyed that, and if so, please consider liking and subscribing for weekly videos. Cheers for now.